and welcome to Stories for Wonderful Children. I'm Dan Wendelin, your host and storyteller. Years ago, I began recording the bedtime stories I told my children every night. Now, I'd like to share those stories with you. I hope you enjoy my Stories for Wonderful Children. There's a little girl named Winella, and she lives in a very special house, full of many special rooms. But the most special room of all is Winella's room, because everything in it is pink and blue. Everything except for one thing. Do you know what that is, Rebecca? Yes. And what color is that, Diana?
Purple.
Yes. So, one morning, Winella was awakened by the sound of the doorbell. The doorbell in Winella's house sounds like this. Actually, can you guess what it sounds like, Rebecca? You think that's what it sounds like, Diana? What do you think it sounds like?
You said that it plays different songs every time in one story.
You're right, I did say that. Well, this particular time when it rang, it did not play a song. It said this. It said, "Excuse me, someone's at the door." And Winella was sort of surprised because the doorbell had never talked before. That was a first. So she heard her mommy open the door, and she heard her say, "So I just sign right here?" And she saw it, and then she heard the door slam. She went downstairs, she slid down, and her mommy was standing at the door with a package. Her mommy said, "There's a package for you, Winella." Winella said, "For me? Let me see. It's not my birthday. It's not Christmas.
Maybe it's Joey's birthday.
I wonder what the package is for." And her mommy said, "Well, you can open it right after breakfast." And she set it at Winella's place at the table. Winella went to get breakfast. On this particular morning, she had some strawberries and cottage cheese. She ate them.
We had cottage cheese like we had at dinner.
Yeah. But Winella had strawberries with hers instead of peaches. She ate her strawberries, she ate her cottage cheese, and then she said, "Okay, can I open the package now, Mommy?" And her mommy said, "Sure." So Winella used her knife and she slit open the tape on the box and she opened it up. There was a card at the top. The card said, "For Winella." Winella opened up the card, and inside it said, "Dear Winella, I so enjoyed it when you visited my palace, and I wanted to send you this little gift of appreciation. It is something that I think you will find useful for many different things." Winella opened it up, and inside there was a blanket. It was unlike any blanket that Winella had ever seen. It was very light, and it was very strong. It was sort of sparkled when it moved, as if it were magic. But as far as she could tell, it was, for the most part, other than the fact that it was so beautiful, it seemed an ordinary blanket. It was pink on one side and blue on the other, and had purple trim all around the border. Winella said, "Well, it's been a long time since I've had a blanket to carry around with me. I think I'll carry it with me today and see if it comes in handy." So then she went up to the roof to see how Joey was doing. And she went up to the roof, and she was walking across the roof to see Joey and see how he was doing in his nest, and he had his head under his wing. And as she was walking across the roof, she did not notice that there was a place where there was sort of a little rise in the roof where one of the shingles was kind of loose, and she stepped on it, and she tripped, and she went flying, and she started to roll down the roof, and she got to the edge, and she fell off the top of the house, and she might have been quite seriously hurt. But fortunately, she had her blanket with her, and she had not dropped it, and as she fell, the blanket was above her head. It popped open and assumed the shape of a parachute, and it seemed to get bigger and she drifted down to the ground underneath the blanket, and she landed really quite gently. She said, "Whew, I was glad I had that blanket with me." She said, "I didn't remember it being that big," and she sort of shook it out. After she shook it and looked at it, it didn't seem any bigger than it had before she fell. She thought, how curious. She decided that now that she was down on the ground, she didn't really feel like climbing back up to the roof to see Joey again. So she decided that she would walk next door to Tracy's house. She was walking next door to Tracy's. Tracy's her
best friend next door, silly.
Yep. So she walked next door to Tracy's house. And as she was walking next door to Tracy's house, she smelled something. It smelled like something burning. She followed the smell right past Tracy's house to the next door neighbor's house. She looked in their backyard, and someone had set a little pile of leaves on fire. The wind had picked up and had blown the leaves up against the side of the house, and the flames were starting to spread from the leaves to the side of the house. Winella said, "Oh no, I've got to put it out." And before she could think about it, she ran over and she took her blanket and she used her blanket to beat out the flames. And as soon as the blanket touched the flames, they went out. Now, frequently you can smother flames with a blanket if it's just a small fire, because it keeps the flames from getting oxygen. But they don't usually go out just like that. Winella picked up the blanket and looked at it, afraid that it had been burnt, but there was not a mark on it. She said to herself, I'm beginning to think that this blanket from the Queen of the Water is not just any old ordinary blanket. She said, let me think, what else could I do with a blanket to test it? Now, she walked back out to the street as she was thinking about this, and she decided that what she would try to do with the blanket would be to make a tent out of it. Now, it was a fairly small blanket, and the tent that she made out of it probably wouldn't even be big enough for her to put her whole body inside. But she went into her backyard and she found a tree with a low branch that she thought she could hang the blanket over and maybe make a little tiny tent. She tossed the blanket up into the air so that it settled over the tree branch, and as it settled over it, she was surprised to see that it went all the way down to the ground. And when she tried to crawl inside the tent that she'd made, it was big enough for her to fit her whole body inside. She was sitting in the tent that she had made out of her blanket thinking, this is a very unique blanket, when she heard someone sniffling outside. She said, "Sad Bear, is that you?" He said, "Yes." And she said, "What's wrong?" Sad Bear said, I want to come in the tent too." And Winella said, "Well, it's a very small blanket, Sad Bear. I'm not sure if there'll be room for both of us, but you're welcome to try." So Sad Bear tried to climb in, and when he climbed in, the tent was big enough for both of them, comfortably. They weren't even squished together. Sad Bear said, "This is a really interesting tent, Winella. Where did you make it from?" And Winella said, "The Queen of the Water sent me a blanket, and it seems to be a very, very special blanket." And the Sad Bear said, "What do you mean?" And Winella said, "Let me show you." She picked up a corner of the tent, and she pulled it off the tree branch and shook it out. And then she picked it up again, and it was again just her blanket. And he said, "How'd you do that?" And Winella said, "I don't know. It's just a very special blanket." And the Sad Bear said, "That's amazing. I wish I had a blanket like that." And Winella said, "I tell you what, Sad Bear, I'll let you borrow it, because I don't need it for the rest of the day. I'm planning on going, and I'm going to go see a movie with my daddy. So you can have the blanket, and you can give it back to me tonight, okay?" And the Sad Bear said, "Oh, that's so nice of you, Winella. Thank you." And he took the blanket, and as soon as he took the blanket, the tears dried up in his eyes, and he said, "I'm going to go play now." And he didn't sound sad at all. Winella just stood there smiling. She said, "Now that is what I call a magical blanket." And then her daddy was calling her from their boat.
Boat?
Their boat, yes, they have a boat. And the boat is parked there's if you go in Winella's backyard, there's that low wall that's the Cat's Paw Highway at the very back of the backyard.
Yeah.
Well, if you climb over that low wall, or if you go through the gate, on the other side of it, there's a little river. And they keep their boat in the river. And her daddy was already in the boat, and he said, Winella, it's time to go to the movie. So she ran out. She got in the boat with her daddy. She put on her life jacket. He put on his life jacket. And he let her drive the boat down the river. And they went down the river to the drive-in movie theater, which is where you don't even have to get out of your boat. There's just a big screen, and it floats in the water. And you pull up to a little speaker, and you park your boat next to the speaker so that you can hear the movie. And they had picked to go see Surf's Up. And Winella enjoyed it very much. It's even more fun to see Surf's Up.
Was there a chair?
No, they just sat in their boat. They had chairs in their boat, and they just sat in their boat and they watched the movie. And another smaller boat came by, and it was selling snacks and treats and stuff. And Winella's daddy bought her some popcorn and something to drink. And so she ate them and drank, and they munched their popcorn while they watched Surf's Up. And that's the end of that story.
Thanks for listening to Stories for Wonderful Children. I created today's story, but questions and clever commentary were supplied by my children. The intro and outro music is by Brandon Thompson. If you enjoy the show, please tell someone about it, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Our email is storiesforwonderfulchildren@gmail.com, and you can also find us on Facebook or Twitter. I'm Dan Windeland, reminding you to tell someone you love a story.